Now it should start, and now here I can also record. Oh yeah, so we are increasing the numbers quickly, but yes, we are also streaming in YouTube, so that's really good. And just if you are connecting in YouTube and then later you see that there is a problem and you want to comment, you cannot comment in YouTube and the Zoom is full, you can always send me an email and we will go through that later. Okay, oh, lovely. You were all sharing where you're connecting from. Also many familiar names. Dos is also here from China. So good. Welcome all. So welcome. So we are starting. Yes. Now here we are. Yes. You see, Susanne is from all around the world. So nice. So welcome also. Just also let me highlight that we are recording this. And so please feel free to remove your camera in case suddenly pops up on top. Sometimes this happens. And for everyone who is completely new to what I do here in I Focus and Write, so let me just quickly introduce myself. So I'm Ana Pineda, and I did my PhD already more than 15 years ago and spent quite some time doing PhDs, postdoc. And during these years, I worked with insects, with plants, with microbes, and I was telling Susanne that actually Trends in Plant Science is my favorite journal. I really love it. I was fortunate enough to publish the 2 articles, which are also my 2 favorite articles, and it was kind of a dream to share with you a bit more of the process of how this works, and who better than Susanne here, the editor-in-chief, who can tell us more of the behind the scene, but also something that very often people in this community ask me, like, how is it this transition from academic to having another alternative career? So Susanne will also be telling us about her editorial career. And I'm doing all this on top of each other. So I'm already kind of introducing you, Susanne. But just very quickly, I try to have once a month a special guest. And so many people from all around the world, like you see here, we have Natalia from Colombia, Asia, Africa. Oh, also in the, please try to be sure that you are muted. There is a way also, let me see if I can mute everyone. Yes, you should now all be muted. I just need to be sure that I can unmute Susanne.
Yeah, I've just unmuted myself. That should be okay.
Yeah, oh, great. And okay, so just quickly continuing. So we do this, we try to do it once a month in a way that the people from all around the world can benefit of having the presence of these special guests here. And what we do with I Focus and Write, well, is that we think that academia can be a kinder place, and we follow a more mindful approach for that, where we combine things of scientific writing, of productivity, and of mindful approaches. Also, you can have a more creative, a more productive, and in the end, a happier academic life. And we do through different types of free activities, also courses, and encourage you to have a look at all the different things that we have there for you. Now, today we have Susanne Brink. Thank you so much for doing this. So she's the editor-in-chief of Trends in Plant Science for many years. She was telling me already, it's one of the most experienced editors in a trends journal. And she's gonna now share all about her and the work she does. So at the end, we will have time for some questions, so you can pop them here in the chat. And again, if you, at some point the room is full, you're in YouTube, send it to me by email. And let's start. So Susanne, welcome, please. The floor is yours, the Zoom floor.
Thank you very much. Let me just try. Okay. What's this? Just trying to, okay.
Oh, but okay. Now we see your whole screen, not like before.
Okay. So what is it you're seeing?
So we also see the notes. Oh, now we see
the right one now? Is that the...
Yes, now it's the right one, yes.
The full slide, okay, that's what I was worried about, that I'm showing the wrong one. Okay, so thank you very much for the introduction, Anna, and I really appreciate this opportunity to talk about what it means to work as an editor, but also to share my experience about publishing in top-tier journals. So I've really tried. I'm going to try to cover quite a bit of ground, but there's no doubt that I won't be able to cover everything. So please, anything I haven't addressed, do really think about asking some questions afterwards. So I'm very happy to hang around afterwards to answer the questions. So like Anna said, I'm the editor for Trends in Plant Science. And so I'm going to give you a little bit of an introduction just on the company background, the company itself, the group I work for. I will also tell you briefly about my own background, how I got into the position that I have at the moment. Then I will tell you a little bit about writing a review article. And then I'll finish with what it actually means to be an editor and the kind of skills that are required to do this job, and give you some pointers if you want to consider this maybe as a career to go into science communication. So just to really cover some essential points that might help you to make that decision. And just one point, Anna mentioned this, many people talk about alternative careers, and I always point out that actually staying in academia is the alternative career path, because the minority of people stays in academia. It's just a pure numbers game that there aren't enough positions out there for all the people that actually have that training, and the majority of people will have to make a decision at some point to go into something else. So in fact, you know, the definition of alternative is kind of fluent. So the company I work for is Elsevier, which is one of the oldest publishing companies around. It was, it really goes, the name goes back hundreds of years. The modern day company was founded in 1880, and the company became global in the 50s and 60s, and now spans 20 countries, trend increasing with, I think we have well more than 70 offices by now. I mean, especially during COVID, we've opened so many new offices. I can't really keep up with it. So it's really a big company. But the group that I'm, seem to be stuck on my slides here. What's going on? Why isn't it going? Here we go. So the group I'm more closely affiliated with within within Elsevier is Cell Press. And this is also, it's already a very established group. It goes back to almost 50 years. The origins were Cell, which was launched in 1974. Cell Press itself was established in 86, and then acquired by Elsevier in 1998. So Cell Press currently employs over 150 PhD level full-time scientific editors like myself. We're based globally around the world, really. The largest number at the moment is based in US, in Boston and Cambridge, Massachusetts. But we also have offices in Europe. So myself, I'm based in London. We have offices in other places in Europe. We are in Amsterdam as well. We've got offices in China and even in India. So we really represented globally. So the Cell Press family currently consists of 28 research journals, 9 partnership journals, so these are mostly society journals that we publish on behalf of societies, and then 16 review journals, and that's the group of the well-known trends in journals, and we really cover all of the life sciences, and even beyond, we've started to venture into chemistry and physics as well, and we've been launching quite a lot of new journals in the last few years. So the Trends group has a slightly different origin than the Cell Press group. So they basically started in parallel. So almost 50 years ago, Cell was launched. Almost 50 years, the first Trends journal was launched. And then they established, these two groups established itself in parallel. And then in 2007, the two groups were joined. So Trends is part of the Cell Press group now. And the Trends journals are really the original monthly review journals. So anything you see now as a review journal, they all go back to that original format that Trends has established. And the idea is really to publish some cutting-edge content, push boundaries, but also be really concise and cater for a really broad audience. So just a little bit about my own background. I've got really followed a standard academic career path. I did my master's and PhD in Germany. And then really got a taste for academia, and in the early days I really thought, okay, this is it, I really like it, I'm going to follow the career path. So I picked up a postdoc. I was lucky enough to obtain an EMBO fellowship, left Germany and came to the UK, and it all went really well. I really enjoyed my work and research, and I would also, if you're not entirely sure what to do at this point, I would always recommend to do a postdoc. I really think back to that time very fondly. I felt like it gave me a lot of freedom to really figure out what I wanted to do, if I wanted to stay in academia or not. And even if you want to do something else, I think doing a postdoc, it gives you that extra bit of experience that's extremely valuable for many other positions that you might want to move on to. And that includes editorial positions. Most editorial positions, we are looking for people with postdoc experience. It's really a benefit. So I mostly worked in plant science, but I did venture into the medical field for a number of years as well. And again, that really was absolutely valuable for the position that I'm doing now. So it's always an experience to have a lot of diversity in your background. And then in 2000, so I came to this crossroad where I still thought I'd probably follow the academic path. I started to applying for funding to maybe set up my own lab, but I was also interested to just explore alternatives. And at that time, there was a vacancy for the editor position on Trends in Plant Science. And I was familiar with the Trends journals. Trends in Plant Science was pretty new at the time. So as a student, I hadn't known it. I had known Trends in Biochemical Sciences, but I loved that format. And I just thought, well, I apply for the job. You know, what can I lose? I got the position to my own surprise at the time, and I absolutely loved it and have never really looked back since then. So I've been doing the job for 22 years now. And currently I've had a few different job titles over the years. My core job has always been to work on the journal, but I have always also been involved with other projects. I will tell you a little bit more about that. My current job title is Senior Managing Trends Editor, which means that I'm also responsible for people management and managing some of my colleagues. So just a few words about the journal itself. So Trends in Plant Science, like I said, that's my core job. It's been around, oops, some of the text seems to be missing. That's weird. That's unfortunate. I hope the other slides will be okay. So the journal has seen a few facelifts over the years. Like I said, it was launched in '96, just a few years before I joined the journal. Currently, it does look like that. Let's see. That's the text that was missing. So the main point I wanted to mention, I'm not just, I mean, Anna very kindly referred to me as the editor-in-chief. In fact, I could pick almost any title because I'm the only editor and the only person working on the journal. So I could as well just say I'm the administrator, I'm the cover editor. Any job on the journal is mine. And that's very typical for the trends journals, which is quite unique for a top-tier journal. Usually there's a team of people, a team of editors with support staff working on it, but the trends journals just have that one person. We do have an external academic advisory board, which we can tap into for advice, but the advisory board does not get involved with the day-to-day running of the journal. They have a purely advisory function. So just a few more words about the journal. Most of you will probably be very familiar with it. The main idea, the emphasis is on short, accessible formats and high diversity. We have quite a number of formats. We have this front matter section with very short articles like spotlights, forums, and so on. And then the back matter section with opinion and review articles. So opinions really are supposed to be very opinionated to stimulate debate. And the review articles are supposed to really focus on new advances from the last 2 to 3 years, so very concise, short reviews. So most trends journals publish around 100 up to maybe 150 articles a year. So this is review type content. The content in principle is commissioned, but we also receive quite a lot of pre-submission inquiries. So we do welcome proposals from the community to reach out to us with ideas. I also want to mention that the research journals within CERT also publish a lot of review content. So this is not just the review journals by design, but the research journals also have a front matter section, and some of these actually publish more review content than individual trends journals. And again, like I said, Pre-submission inquiries are all welcome pretty much for all these journals. So although content is commissioned in principle, we do welcome proposals. And this is really where you come in. So I'm now moving into this part where I want to give you some pointers about writing a good review article, and really give you kind of like a tick list to consider when you sit down with an idea. So obviously you have to start with an idea first. So you sit down and think about what would be a good reason to write a review. So usually it's about updating the literature, synthesizing the literature in a new way. For opinion articles, it's usually about maybe overturning some conventional thinking or coming up with a new model. And so again, take home message here is that some self-promotion is expected. So it's expected that you put your own stamp onto it, but it shouldn't be the only goal when you write an article, that you just want to promote your own research, for example. I mean, especially for review articles, of course, there should be balance. So it's kind of a fine line to walk between writing a balanced article, but still putting your own voice onto it. So the first hurdle that you have to overcome is to convince the editor. I mean, in principle, of course, you could just sit down, write a review, send it off, and hope for the best. But it is usually better to contact an editor before you write the review to figure out, is there scope for it, before you invest all that time. So the best way for convincing an editor is the cover letter. This is a really important type of communication, and this is the same for any research article that you want to submit to a journal. So this basic principle is for anything you do in communicating with an editor: write a really good cover letter. Do not underestimate the power and the importance of the cover letter. And the critical aspects for that is that you are concise and interesting. So you need to get that main message across that you want to convey. And part of that, of course, is what is really novel, what is thought-provoking. This is what the editor is always going to look for. Why is it timely? Why is it suitable for the journal that you're contacting? So make sure that you understand the scope of the journal before you contact the editor. Look at the journal website, which usually gives you a lot of information about the scope of the journal. And then finally, why should you be the one to write this article? What is your expertise on the topic? This is always something the editor will look for. So you sold the idea to the editor. The editor said, yes, that's a great idea. It's timely, it's novel, I like it. You're the right person to write it. So now you have to sit down and actually write the article. So where do you start? The best thing is really to sit down and make a bit of a roadmap, to think about what is the main message that you want to get across. And of course, you have to write a good introduction. You have to make sure that you grab the reader's attention. Just remember that just like the editor, when they read the letter that you write to them, that the editor doesn't have a lot of time to make that decision. So you have to grab them early. And it's the same with pretty much any audience out there. If you don't convince the reader early on with the abstract or introduction that this is an interesting article, you might actually lose them very quickly. So really put a lot of care into that introduction to make the reader care. But don't put in too much. So you need to have a good background. You need to make sure to wrap that idea into a good background story, but don't put too much into it either. So when you write the introduction, make sure you put the key message into it, put some background into it, and then put in supporting layers. It's a little bit like when you read the newspaper and you write a good news story. You always start with one little core, one little seed, and then you put more layers onto it. And then you reiterate the argument throughout the article, but avoid going on tangents. So don't put in too much information. So I might repeat some of these points over and over again because some of the points are more important than others. So when you sit down and write that draft, really think about that topic and the scope that you want to get across. Distill the literature down to that one single thesis that you really want to get across and hold that reader's interest. It's really important that you know what is part of that topic, but it's also important to know what isn't part of the topic. If you put in too much information that isn't relevant, again, you might lose the reader early on. So that's really important to stay on track. And really make sure that you get the science right. There's nothing more infuriating for peer reviewers when they read the article and they realize there's so many facts that are just wrong. You're really going to have a problem during the peer review. So really make sure that you get the science right, which of course is very important when you write for top tier journals, that you come across as an authority on the topic, and especially with a broad audience, not everybody is a specialist. So they really need to be presented with correct science. And like I said, do know your scope and stick to it. And less is more. Don't put anything in that isn't relevant for the story. So know your audience. When you do aim at top tier journals, you will always write for a broad audience. So do keep that in mind, that you put in the appropriate level of background to make sure that you don't use too much jargon. You explain the technical terms. But also remember that you really need to tell a story. That's important for the audience, but it's also important for the peer review process. When it's really tough to read through the article, again, reviewers will be really annoyed and you lose your audience early on again as well. Keep paragraphs short, keep sentences short. That's really important tool for pretty much any writing that you do. And like I said, do introduce key terms and avoid jargon. And of course, always really remember to use some good examples and figures to illustrate complex concepts. And what's really important, again, going back to what I said earlier in terms of putting your own stamp onto the review, make sure when you write the review that it isn't just a collection of facts. You really need to make sure that you digest, you curate, you interpret the data, you put a synthesis in, and that you really give that extra value that sets your article apart from any other review that's already been written on the topic. So consider any unresolved questions that should be identified, and maybe also suggest new steps for the field leading on from these unresolved questions. Take a stance on controversy. That's specifically important when you write opinion articles. Also consider to maybe adding enhancing features. So this depends on the journal. So at Cell Press, for example, we offer authors the opportunity to add video content. We have something called video figure 360s for review articles, but also the Cell Press research journals, they offer video abstracts, which give you an opportunity to showcase your own work in connection with articles. And the figure 360s are narrated versions of one figure. It's a bit like presenting a poster. So this is specific for Cell Press, but look at the journal's website, look at previous content. There might be other enhancing features that you might be able to use to sell your article. And then finally, make sure to get feedback. So when you've written your article, give it to people that are maybe not that close to the topic. Ask some colleagues to read through it, ask some non-specialists, and ask them what might be, where they might have gotten lost, what isn't that clear. Think about rephrasing it, and always make sure you balance that feedback with the own goals you have for your article. Oh, actually, I must have lost some text. So one point I wanted to say, so when you finalize your article and you read through it, make sure that every time you read through it, you try and improve the language. You try and make it more concise. You shorten every single time you read a sentence, you can make it better. I promise you. You should go through that at least a few times when you've written an article. The first version is never the best version to improve. So even before you ask for feedback, always do that. So now you've reached the point that you've written the article, you want to submit it to you are submitting it to the journal. So when you've submitted it, it can be sent back at this point. If for any reason, maybe you didn't stick to the author guidelines, there's any kind of problem the editor has with it, so it could be sent back. In most cases, it won't be. In most cases, it will be sent straight to peer review. If it will be sent back early, the editor will give you some pointers what was wrong with it. And then please do follow the editor's advice. They want to work with you and help you out. So don't dismiss that. So in most cases, the article will go straight to peer review. For review articles at Trends, in my experience, the rejection rate after peer review is maybe 10 to 15%, compared to if you have a research article, the rejection rate might be up to 90%. So the rejection rate for review content generally isn't that high. So of course, the idea with peer review, is to collect feedback from other peers. When that comes back, those comments are assembled into a letter back to the author, combined with some comments from the editor as well. So the editor is there to help you to make the article more accessible to a broad audience. So if there is something unclear, then the editor will point that out. And again, do not ignore that advice. That's really important to really follow that guidance as well. So the article goes back to you, to the author, for revision. And then hopefully any issues can be resolved during that revision, and the article gets accepted and published. Then there's usually a final round of copy editing. You get the proofs, you get a final opportunity to make some changes, and then the article is published. So just really to recap the absolute essentials that you should think about when you write a review: figure out the why. Why is it a good time to write something now? Identify the topic and the scope and the audience. So with the scope, of course, you also then identify the ideal journal you want to aim at. Make a map, follow it. Go beyond summarizing just the data. Make sure you put some novel ideas into it, put your stamp onto it, make the article stand out, and then get some feedback before you submit the article to the journal. Right, so pretty much everything I've told you, although I'm focusing on writing review articles, this is still relevant for writing any kind of article, for writing a research article as well. It's still the same kind of key points, that you should have a good story, you should consider the scope, all of that is relevant. And also, although I'm focusing on trends journals and press journals here, if you aim at any top-tier journal, the top-tier journals, they will use the same kind of points to evaluate content. So they all look at that the article is relevant for the scope of the journal. Articles should be innovative. They should significantly advance the field. They should be well written, and they should be of interest to a broad audience. So it doesn't matter if you consider submitting to Nature or Science or any of the top-tier journals. They will be looking. The editors will be looking for the same general criteria. And just to briefly mention, there are article transfer systems. I'm sure you're aware of these kind of systems that most publishers have these days. These are mostly relevant for research articles. So when you submit an article, and if for any reason it might get rejected from one journal, then we try to keep it within the journal group and offer the author the opportunity to transfer the article to another journal, which then, again, it's entirely author-driven, this process, but then that second journal might just be better suited and might be happier to take on that article. We do have, so this is a formal process where also reviewer comments get transferred. We do kind of a more informal process for the review journals. For technical reasons, we can't offer the official article transfer yet. But if we have to reject articles, we do talk to colleagues and see if there may be another journal in the group that might be interested to take that article on. And also, just a final point to mention, if you do get rejected, if you feel that you don't agree with that decision, then do consider writing a rebuttal letter. I always, as an editor, I'm always happy to hear the author's thoughts on that. Nobody's perfect. You might have a good reason to push back. So don't just let it sit there. If you feel you have a good reason, then do try and write a rebuttal letter as well. And I'm just putting in a pointer here for some useful resources. I'm going to mention that again on another slide as well. We do have quite a lot of content on the publisher's website. Every publisher will have some tools that are very useful to look at in terms of writing articles, performing peer review, and so on. There's a lot of really useful tools that you can look up. So the next part, I want to talk to you about what it means to be an editor and what it takes to actually pick this up as a career. So what is it that we do as editors? It's actually not that dissimilar to being an active researcher. We still keep in touch with science. Of course, we work with the journal, so it means we have to really do a lot on the journal side, but we actually are still very involved with the science part as well, which personally I think is a really exciting part of the job. So we keep in touch with the science, we determine the strategy of the journal. That depends a bit on the seniority of the editor. Obviously, the higher up you are, the more you are responsible for determining strategies for the journal. Then we select from either submitted papers or we commission papers. That depends on which journal you work at. So for research journals, of course, it's more about dealing with submitted papers. We take articles through peer review. Then we make the decision based on the peer review feedback. We edit the articles for clarity. So as an editor for a review journal, we do more editing. On a research journal, you do slightly less editing. And then, of course, we communicate the decision to the authors. So what you might not consider so much, we also do some additional work as editors. We don't just do the pure journal work. So a lot of the journal work involves administrative tasks as well. So as a trends editor, I have to look at balancing the pipeline. I have to write a lot of emails. I have to hire and fire the advisory board and interact with the board as well. I have to think about producing cover images. I'm also involved with promoting the journals. So obviously, like I said, we have to stay in touch with science. So for that reason, of course, we go to conferences, but that also gives us opportunities to promote the journals. So some marketing activities are involved. We use social media to promote the journals. So, for example, we run Twitter channels or maybe Facebook. We are involved with updating the website. We are involved with press releases as well. And generally, we're just resident topical experts. So I frequently get involved with supporting, for example, research journals, any questions people might have on plant science where they feel I might know a little bit more than they do. They reach out, and then I'm happy to give some advice. And also, we do cover for each other in case of vacancies or in case of holidays. So I might get to work on any kind of journal out there, not just plant science, because it's a combination of having the scientific expertise, but also the expertise of what it means to run a journal and perform peer review and so on. So there are a lot of extra activities, but there are still more activities beyond the pure journal work. So, for example, we organize a lot of conferences, symposia, webinars, lab links, one-day conferences. So all of these are really driven by the editors. And this is really exciting work. So this is a lot more than I ever imagined I would do when I started this job. We also have this resource. It's more than, it started as a blog, but it's way more than a blog now, which is called Cell Mentor. And a lot of the content on there has been written by editors. So this is a collection of videos and written content which relates to anything that is relevant for life as a researcher, but also really goes beyond that. So it's about producing data, but also about writing articles, performing peer review, but also how to behave at conferences, interact with other researchers, maybe funding issues as well. So it's a really valuable resource that I can highly recommend. So what does it take to move into science communication if that's something that you're interested in? I mentioned my own career path, which is really pretty standard. There are variations on the theme, but the essential requirements is that you have a PhD level education in a scientific, with a scientific background, so with a specific scientific focus. Obviously, each journal you want to apply for, you should match your background with the scope of that journal. It goes without saying. However, there are a lot of journals that have a very broad scope. So especially as a plant scientist, you could still consider going beyond just working for a plant science journal. You can really think about any broad scope journal. So PhD level is really a minimum requirement. Many journals will look at additional postdoc experience as well, but this really depends on what level of position you're aiming at. There are very junior positions and more senior positions. Any senior position, you need a lot more experience. I have put here no publishing experience required. That is true for any junior level position, but for a more senior level position, usually it's more likely that you will move into those positions once you're already on that career path. The key skills that are required for this are a lot of the skills that you would have already picked up as a researcher. So communication skills are vital for running your own research project, teamwork, adapting to change. A lot of these are transferable skills that you already have that you might not even realize you have, but that are really quite similar for working on the journal. The absolute crucial qualities are passion for the subject, coping with stressful situations, and working towards tight deadlines. And these 2 points are really heavily linked because of these tight deadlines. It's quite often quite stressful as well. But also the fact that you have to make some decisions that can be far-reaching, that can be really impacting people's careers. So that can be quite stressful. And for example, if you work on a research journal, the fact that the rejection rate is quite high, that can be quite stressful as well, that you have to show a lot of diplomacy skills as well when you deal with authors. So the main take-home message here is really find out your own strength. For example, if you're really struggling with multitasking and time management, then I would not really recommend editorial jobs as your career path, because like I said, it's very can be very stressful when you have to really work towards tight deadlines continuously. It's absolutely relentless on that. So you really have to be highly organized. So where can you find these kind of professional editor positions? That can be a little bit confusing when you just look at a journal without any prior knowledge and you just see, okay, editor, and you don't really know, is that position, is it a full-time paid for position or not? So generally, a lot of the top tier journals will have professional editors. So journals like Nature Science, the whole fleet of PLOS journals, of course, the press journals I mentioned, JCB is just one example, the Lancet journals in the medical fields, they have a huge portfolio of journals as well. So these all have a lot of full-time paid positions that are occupied by professional editors. We also have the positions of academic editors. And what I mean by that is that you have people who are working full-time in academia and using, or basically giving their time to support scientific journals. These are usually unpaid part-time positions that might get a little bit of a fee for the position. For example, being the editor-in-chief for Plant Cell, this is a position that is essentially unpaid. There's a bit of a fee for it, but the editor-in-chief who does it will not actually leave the academic position to do this, to perform this job. However, these positions are often supported by professional editors. So for example, PNAS and eLife, they have these academic editor positions, but they also employ professional editors to support that academic editor. So just briefly to mention again, I mentioned the editorial board on a few occasions already. So for this press journals, the editorial board really has a purely advisory function. So these positions are not paid for, they're not full-time, they're rotated over quite quickly. And the editorial board does not get involved in the day-to-day running of the journal. They don't set any editorial policies or anything like that. They don't help out with peer review. They really have a purely advisory function. However, the take-home message here is that really the editorial board position can vary a lot. They usually are academic, but like I said before, it really depends on the journal you look at. So there are actually some journals where, again, if you look at Plant Cell or Plant Physiology, where the editorial board actually does a lot of paper handling and peer review as well. So you can find some of that information on the journal website, but the best is actually to just reach out to editors and just ask if you're interested in any of these kind of positions. So again, just talking about individual job titles and job descriptions. These are some of the job titles that you might see if you look for positions. A lot of job titles mean different things depending, so the same job title can mean different things depending on the journal you look at. So it can be very deceptive. So the take-home message is read any job description very carefully. The title itself doesn't mean much. Editor-in-chief is probably the only one that pretty much means what it says, but any other job, any other title can mean very different things. So the job description is absolutely critical to really look at. And just in case you're interested in terms of salaries, working in publishing, a lot of people always think when you work for a big company or kind of industry that you might have a massive salary, but the salaries are comparable or less than academia. I mean, they're quite decent, but they're not, you're not going to get rich by it. This is why you definitely need a passion for the subject. So nobody's in this for the money. We're definitely here for the passion of it. And just a few more pointers. If you think about, okay, this might be a career path for you, but you're not entirely convinced that you want to jump right into it, then you can actually just maybe try it out before you leave academia behind and pick up a new job. So the starting point is really figure out, are you interested in reading more broadly? So as an editor, you definitely need to have a broad background. So if you feel like, nah, I'm really happy with the niche topic I'm working on, I don't really enjoy reading more broadly, that should give you some idea that maybe being an editor isn't really for you. If you're interested, then you should talk to your advisor, maybe try and get more involved with peer review and articles. Again, that could really show you if this is something that you enjoy. Just generally writing, editing research, maybe starting off with writing shorter commentary articles like the spotlights that we publish at Trends. That's always a good starting point. Before really jumping in and writing longer articles, and maybe also figuring out if you want to just consider science communication as a career choice. There are some opportunities for freelance editing. For example, again, the ASPB, the organization behind plant cell, plant physiology, that do have some positions for freelance editing. Talk to an editor if you get an opportunity to pick their brain. When you go to conferences, quite often you might bump into editors. They're always happy to share their experience. So don't be shy. It doesn't harm to ask at all. And just generally engage with people beyond your peers. See the bigger picture. I mean, that's really the starting point. If you're really interested in science communication, then that's something that you should always strive for. Just a few free resources I want to mention. The Elsevier Research Academy that offers a lot of e-learning modules for anything to do with research, but there's also a lot about careers and funding and writing articles, peer review and so on. So these are really excellent resources that are entirely free to use. Also, just to mention, there's a postdoc free access program that not a lot of people know about. If you're in between jobs, you can apply for free, a whole year's free access to Elsevier content. And the Cell Mentor I already mentioned is a fantastic collection of articles and videos that is really, really useful. Anything to do with research and careers in science communication. So with that, I'd like to wrap up. Thank you a lot for your attention. And I've listed just a few current vacancies. So again, if you're looking for jobs, publishers' websites are usually a good starting point. Most publishers will have a link to the current vacancies with a detailed job description and maybe even someone you can contact for more details. So in my experience, science communication is absolutely booming. We've started to list so many more vacancies. Just during COVID, it's been absolutely exploding. There's so many more journals that have been launched and so many more positions out there. So the future is really very bright for science communication. So with that, I'd like to finish, and I'm happy to take on any questions you might have.
Well, thank you so much, Susanne. It was amazing. So many things I didn't know. And thanks so much for the resources. Also, all these positions right now open, for example. I was really surprised.
It's just a short list. There were more. I literally just spent a minute to look at some of the vacancies. There are definitely a lot more vacancies than that.
And the Cell Mentor website also looks amazing. Actually, I wanted to highlight that in my course for the how to prepare figures, I look a lot to the resources that are there on how preparing figures. They are really excellent. Oh yeah, let's see if comments are coming. Someone had to leave. So yeah, if you have questions, please drop them in the chat. So we still have some time to go through that. And there is some people in YouTube, because at some point we max out here. So if you are watching it on YouTube, you can send me your questions by email, and I will read them here. So think of some questions you have for Susanne. In the meantime, just a bit of something that caught my attention. So indeed, the rejection rate is quite low, right? But I guess you have a high rejection rate when people submit this invitation request. I don't know how.
Yeah, so I guess maybe I wasn't entirely clear about the rejection rate. So the rejection rate I put up was at the moment when the full submission, the fully written article is submitted that had previously been agreed with the editor. So of course there were a few ways to think about the rejection rate. Of course, I mentioned the idea that we are all happy to receive proposals. So I get a lot of ideas sent to me every single day. And of course, for that list of ideas, the rejection rate is higher just because I don't have enough space to publish all these articles. So for that, maybe my rejection rate is 60 to 70%, just because I get hundreds. You know, I mentioned that some people get up to 800 ideas a year, and if you only publish 100 plus articles, then obviously we have to reject the rest just purely for space reasons, even if the idea might.
Of course.
This is also where I mentioned that we do work with other journals. I continuously talk with colleagues. If I see something that I think is a great idea, but I have no space for it, or maybe I have already an article that's very close to it, then I will try and maybe talk to a colleague and see, well, are you interested? You know, is that something for your journal as well? So we always try to help the author out on that as well, if that's possible.
Yeah, that's right, because we were chatting that indeed trends in plant science, in my field, for example, a lot of colleagues publish also in trends and ecology and evolution. So maybe other of the journals have also other one that is a bit more parallel, right?
We do talk to each other. The biggest complication with those two journals is that we are the ones with the highest rate of proposals sent to us, because these are the two journals that don't have a direct competition with another monthly review journal. So like in the medical field, you know, there's so many more monthly review journals, so it kind of, the proposals are spread over a higher number of journals. But for us, we're kind of at the top of the pile, so we get all the wonderful ideas sent to us, so we just have to reject more. And it's very rare that I can send something to Tree because they already have some.
They are also completely overloaded.
That's the biggest problem, exactly.
Okay, so yeah, we have indeed some quizzes coming, and it's very nice because it's a bit on the topic that we were commenting. Like, is it necessary to add an expert for submission? And also related to that, they are also commenting that indeed it must be easier if you have a big name. So how feasible is it for early career researchers unless they put a senior name?
So in fact, trends in plant science, I pride myself that out of all of the trends journals, I have much fewer big names than anybody else. And I've given a lot of early career researchers opportunities to get in. And across the board, it's not just early career researchers, it's also researchers from any kind of minority background, geographical minority background, and so on. So I've got authors from a more diverse range of countries than any other journal. The big names stand out, I think. This is why people think, oh, it's always big names. But it's perception by the reader as well as anything else, that people think, oh, it's just the big names. But if you really do the numbers games, and if you really crunch the numbers and you really look at all the content, you see that there's a lot of diversity. So I did mention, when you look at the list of requirements to sell the idea to the editor, that expertise is one of the requirements. So I do ask people to include a list of relevant articles they published on the topic. And what I mean by that, you know, I want to see some kind of proven track record. I mean, you cannot, in my experience, write a review if you have nil experience on that topic, if you've never published in that field. There's just, you need a little bit of expertise on that. You know, it's not just me you have to convince, there's also some other experts you have to convince. If you write a review, if you have nil experience on the topic, you're not really going to convince anybody. And it's a fine line to walk to know how much experience is required. I want to see at least a few articles published on that topic, right? That show me, okay, you've got a bit of experience. But I do give people the benefit of the doubt. If it's a very, very junior author, then I do recommend that they really collaborate with a more senior author, just really to have that complete package. I'm happy for junior authors to write the article, but at some point you need some extra input, in my experience, if you're very junior, to really, you know, push it to that extra level of expertise that you really need to convince the other experts in the field, especially if it's an opinionated article. But I'm really happy to give a lot of junior authors an opportunity. And also, I mean, this is in fact one of the reasons why my rejection rate has increased in recent years, because I've given more junior authors an opportunity. But then it doesn't always work out. Sometimes I just have to say, listen, it's just not quite there yet. You just have to, you know, work on this a bit more and maybe come back in a couple of years. So I definitely do not go by big names.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I love it. I love that you give that opportunity. But also, what we were commenting, that in the end, like plant science, is a very collaborative work. So maybe you are a junior author, but remember that you're not writing this alone. That you can probably be there with some more senior authors. And
well, I should mention I've had opportunity. I mean, I've had incidences where because I got so many pre-submission inquiries, so sometimes let's say it's a short article, somebody wants to write a spotlight about a new paper that's come out. So what has happened a few times to me, that I get more than one person picking the same paper and saying, I'd like to write a spotlight. So it's like come in roughly the same time, and I've got a very junior author and a more senior author. I have sometimes tried to actually match them up and say, listen, could you maybe write this together? You know, giving the more junior one an opportunity to collaborate with the senior one. It doesn't always work out, but at least I want to suggest it. You know, the junior author would have never reached out to that person. Quite often they're not from the same lab, they might not even know each other. But if it does work out, it can actually even lead to future collaborations. I've had one incident where the junior author, in the end, he ended up with getting a job offer from the senior author in their lab. So I just thought, oh, that's amazing. You know, maybe they would have never met otherwise. So you never know. But I mean, this is the power that an editor can have, which I think this is just amazing, you know, when I can maybe create new collaborations in this way.
Yes, love it. And I actually, with my students, I always encourage them, like, reach that senior author of another lab that you might not know yet and propose them to, and writing this type of article is a great start for a collaboration. We have some more questions here. So Jordi is asking, is it required a previous publication in a high impact factor journal for that consideration that you said, that you look at indeed at the track record?
I don't really look at where anything was published. I just want to see that something was published. So, I mean, this, I can't remember who said it, but somebody said a long time ago, if you have a good idea, it will always get published somewhere, and it doesn't really matter where it gets published, you know. So it's, because you can also have situations where somebody has, I don't know, 3 science papers and it looks fantastic on the CV. And then you realize actually that person may not even have been involved with writing these articles so much. You know, it was just one co-author on the list. So unless you really know the history behind the individual article and who has contributed what to each article, you don't really know. So personally, I don't really look at the journal. I just really look at, has there been any kind of activity in that field? You know, is there any kind of output on that topic? But where it was published, I don't really worry so much about that.
Oh, so good to hear. And we have more questions here. Like, how have you, indeed, because you have been like 20 years already in the publishing world. So how have you seen this changing through the years?
Yeah, it's changed a lot. So I do actually quite often talk about how this environment has changed. So, and that includes my own job, you know, even when I started. So the only constant for me has been that I still work on the same journal. But the way I work on the journal and the way my own job description has changed is really massive. And this is why in the key skills for science communication, I always put in, you know, being able to adapt to changes is absolutely vital. It does change every single year massively. The way we do things, technology has changed, everything changes. But that also makes it very appealing. For me, that's one of the reasons why I'm still here, because the job is never the same. And I really do like that. It's just like science is never the same, right? Science constantly evolves. And that's something that always attracted me to science as well. That is always interesting. And that's the same with the science communication. And also the fact that you can actually be part of that change, that you can shape it, which maybe that hasn't come across that much in my talk, but a lot of the projects we get involved with, some of the projects actually get started by editors. We have ideas and we put it out there. For example, coming up with new article types. So a lot of the articles that I briefly showed in the front section. So a lot of those, as editors, we come together as a group and then we talk about, so what do we feel is needed out there, what isn't there yet? And we come up with new ideas. And so I, for example, started a new format, Technology of the Month, a few years ago, which I haven't mentioned here, but we publish one of those every single month, just a brief, like a little one-page highlight of one technology. And I think people find that quite useful. So, I mean, that is really fantastic to be part of that journey, that you can be extremely creative, actually, which is very, very exciting.
That's really nice, because many people are afraid that when you leave academia, you won't have all those challenges and possibility to be creative, but you can. And actually, sorry, but I noticed that also the question was, what about for early careers? Have you seen any change through the years on how the opportunities for publishing for early careers have changed?
So what did you say for early
career scientists? Like you being an editor and seeing the new challenges that the early career scientists are facing from that position, is that something that you have noticed?
Well, I'm not sure if I understand the question. You mean for the people who stay in academia, or you mean for people who go into science communication?
Yeah, people are staying in academia and that need to still keep publishing and publishing more and higher. And
oh, you mean just in terms of publishing?
Yes,
I think anything. I think it's. I mean, it's probably not for me to really comment on that too much, because I see it from the editor's point of view, and I might have the wrong impression. I feel that we're working very hard to give early career scientists a lot more opportunities. That's definitely a massive aim, and as far as I know, that's across the publishing industry. I'm not entirely sure how successful we are. I think that's more easier to judge from the scientist point of view. So again, that's something I'm trying to figure out when I go to conferences and talk to people. Do people feel that it has become easier? But we definitely work very hard at creating more opportunities. And this goes back to what I said earlier when I consider who I'm inviting. So just to give you one example, when I started, it was an absolute no-go to even consider a PhD student having take the lead on writing a review article. That we would never say that would never be an option at all. But in recent years, I've had many articles that were started by PhD students, and then, obviously in collaboration with more senior authors, and maybe then polished off by more senior authors. But initially, we would never consider that, and that's, on that aspect, we've already changed our mind about that. That is an opportunity, and we have a lot of internal projects specifically aimed at early career researchers to make their life easier.
Oh, that's so nice. Questions keep coming. So also for the, I keep choosing them here a bit random. So for the review, the proposal, the request to be invited, can you elaborate a bit more what should be included in that?
So yeah, sorry, I didn't mention that. So we do actually have quite a lot of details on the website. There's, when you look at the journal website, there's a link to pre-submission inquiries. And there were very detailed descriptions on what we're looking for individual articles. So for example, if I just give one example for if you really want to write a review article, so what I'm looking for is really, first of all, the idea. Obviously, what is it that you want to get across? Goes back to that thesis I mentioned. The scope you're thinking about. Why is it timely? So why should it be written now? What other reviews have been published on the topic, and why is yours different? So this is because that's something that I would look at, but I'd like the author to tell me, because they're the expert on the topic. They're in a much better position to tell me why should there be another review now? Because most topics, unless it's a brand new topic that has never been reviewed, which is very rare, most topics will have been reviewed numerous times. So why is it a good point to have another review now? So that's really crucial to put in there. And same for opinion articles. Why is that article different than anything that's been published before? And then also a short list of references, of relevant references that you plan to cover, again, which makes it easier for me to see the scope, but also what you have to remember is that as an editor, I need to compare it to other things that I've already got in the pipeline. So all of this will really help me to see, is there maybe overlap? That's the biggest challenge I have at the moment, because I have so many things in the pipeline to really see, is there potential overlap with that article with something else? So rather put more information in than not enough. Some people send me fully written articles, which can be, it can be helpful for some things, but if everybody does it, I just don't have the time to read through that. So ideally an outline with the points I just mentioned, reference list, that is, and then the final point, to show your expertise on the topic, to just again include a few references of what you've published on the topic, so that I can see that you've got a bit of a proven track record on that topic. So these are really the point, but it's all listed on the website. So if you look at that submission link, and again, most journals will have some detailed instructions on their website, what it is they're looking for.
Yes, great. But it's true, the thinking what is in the pipeline, of course, is something that we don't know. And we might think, oh no, there is nothing like this, but there is something just there in the process, right, of being published.
Yeah, the biggest problem
for
for me is because people have been so prolific, specifically during COVID, I already have content for this entire year in-house, which might be hard to mention, but basically I'm already getting articles for 2024. So that's a massive pipeline, and I publish about 150, 160 articles per year. So that's a lot of content that is already sitting here, and I have to constantly be aware of potential overlaps.
Yeah, well, the full year indeed. But that was one of the predictions, right? That with COVID, people didn't have so much time to do experimental work, and that these review type of papers would. Yes, this is not a question, but I was wondering, do you have trouble finding reviewers?
Yes, that's so in the industry, we're really talking about the reviewer crisis. It's really a massive, massive issue. And I always keep wondering if I'm already struggling. I can't even imagine what it's for journals that are a bit further down the ranking. I feel they probably struggle even more. So personally, because I have so much content in-house, I have the luxury that I can give reviewers a lot more time to provide comments. But a lot of journals are short on time as well. So it's not just finding someone, but finding someone to do it quickly, which is really tough. I fully appreciate that everybody is stretched and it's really difficult. I would never, be cross with any reviewer, anybody turning me down. I can totally understand that people just don't have the time. It really is difficult. So again, that's also something where we're thinking about early career researchers and giving people opportunities to get more involved with peer reviews, peer review tasks, and which helps everybody, which gives people at the beginning of their career more experience. They might have a little bit more time than some of the very senior guys. So yeah, we're constantly looking at all sorts of ways to try and broaden our network and try and find more people.
Yeah, well, I was associate editor of Journal of Ecology for a few years, and I have to say the best reviews that I got back were because at some point I asked, if you cannot do it, but you have someone in your lab that is more junior and you would like to do it together, I would be happy. And some people took on that, and then they did it together, and those reviews were great. They were very thorough,
that's exactly.
And it was.
I totally agree with that. I mean, I always encourage people. A lot of the time, senior researchers will come back to me and say, I've got this talented postdoc or junior person in my lab, and could I do it together? And I always support that. And quite often, I say, well, if you want, I can split it up, so I can send out another invitation, so that person gets an individual credit for what they're doing. So they can still talk to each other when they do think about the comments, but they will submit them separately to just, give that second person also the experience of what it means to submit to the journal and so on. So I'm definitely very supportive of that.
Yeah, that's nice. Then Tsuko mentioned that actually applied for jobs, but didn't get a reason behind. Well, I don't know what you think, but I always say, well, maybe circle back, get back to them to see if they can tell you what wasn't wrong in that application.
So I missed the beginning. Did you say somebody applied for a job and were turned down?
For the editorial jobs at Elsevier, like 5 positions, and she never heard back about what was wrong, or what to do.
So I mean, Elsevier, obviously, it's a huge company with I think over 6,000 employees, but in fact, we're part of an even larger company group. So there are a lot of different parts of the business, and a lot of things are centralized. So when you apply for jobs, so for example, the vacancies we have right now, people usually get routed to a recruiting part of the company first, and then maybe to HR department, and then eventually they will come through to the people who actually deal with the vacancies on the editorial side. So sometimes there can be stumbling blocks in between. So anybody who comes through to us, they will definitely always get a response back, but sometimes there were earlier parts that we have no access to, some recruiters, and there can be complications. Usually people should definitely get a reply back, and even if it's just an automated reply, to be honest. And like you said, if there was ever any question about that, I would always say, yes, do really get back to people and ask, and ask for a reply and what actually happens. Like I said, at the very least, there should be an automated reply explaining. I know some companies have this system where they say, well, if you don't hear back from us, just assume you have been successful, something like that. At the very least, it should be happening. But so at least with Cell Press, if you come through to the people on the editorial side who are responsible for recruiting, you will definitely get an individual personalized response back, especially if you're turned down.
Oh, that's good to hear. And Susanne, were you academic editor before becoming professional editor? Were you an academic editor before being a professional? Yes, you.
No. I just while I was working in the lab, I was involved with some of the peer review duties with some of the supervisors I worked with. But beyond that, in fact, it's a little bit more complicated. It's true, I didn't mention that in terms of my career path. So although I followed the standard career path in terms of PhD postdoc, but I did do a bit of freelance work on the side. So that wasn't really an academic editor as such, but and it was, I'm not sure, I think it just in my mind maybe prepared me for this job, just in terms of realizing that there were other jobs out there that I might be able to do. It wasn't strictly related to what I do now, but I worked for a publishing company, and that had to do with patents. And I did something in different languages to kind of translate patent applications, that sort of thing. So it wasn't really related to this job, but just the fact that I was in touch with a publishing company and talked to people who did a job similar to this job now, and they put this thought in my mind that actually, have you ever thought about becoming an editor? And I was very dismissive of that to begin with, but then eventually realized, actually, yeah, maybe, why not? Something to think about.
Yeah, I love that. And also you mentioned that the skills that you use now and that are needed in this career are in the end very similar to the skills that people have in when you are doing research. And this is something that I see over and over that people don't realize. Now you have all this, all those skills.
This is something, when I was doing my second postdoc at University College London, they actually had this course about transferable skills. Because that was the point where I was at this crossroad where I thought, do I really want to stay in academia? And I literally just saw this course advertised at the university, and I just thought, I'll just drop in, just see what they're talking about. And that's exactly where they were talking about these transferable skills, where I really hadn't thought about how useful all these skills are that you pick up as a researcher and what else you can do with that. So there's even, at that time, there were even, like in the banking sector, they were looking for people with an academic background, and from all sorts of different kind of industries, they were really looking for researchers, because you really have extremely useful skills.
Yes. No, and that's the thing. I see that when we are all there, we don't realize, because everyone around you has the same skills. So it seems like there is nothing special in there. But when I always say, like, only 1% of the population hold a PhD. So when you come out of the academic world and you see how valuable all these things that you have can be for the
exactly.
For the
especially these things that you're self-motivated and you run your own projects. That's really unusual. That's it's not commonplace to have that kind of skill.
Love it. Okay, well, we will close this session. Thanks so much to everyone who has attended live or that is watching the YouTube live stream or maybe the replay. Just if you enjoyed, just please share this talk to those around you. The talk will stay there in the YouTube channel, so you can also subscribe or share that link. And I hope to see many of you again in some of our coming activities. And thanks so much, Susanne, again for doing this. And I expect a number of submissions coming out of people watching this, and I hope they can implement all the nice tips you have shared.
Well, thank you again
thanks a
for the
lot.
opportunity. I really enjoyed that.
Thank you. Thanks so much, and thanks to everyone. And see you soon. Bye bye.
Thanks everyone.